Welcome back, one and all, to the second part of These Are the Voyages, What Lies Beneath. And yes, your elite, highly trained Starfleet officers work out quite quickly that this sodding, dripping, wet, dank, dark, rusting corridor is not in fact the computer core level that you were supposed to be going to. Although it has to be said that probably isn't in any better state given the sheer lack of interest the Ferengi have in, well, pest control for certain. More spiders. I think these guys are just here for the nuisance value and to keep you on your toes. However, here we have yet another staple of the horror genre. You cannot go back the way you came. You are locked in. To borrow from Doom, the only way out is through. And you'll notice from the first part, you'll notice as we carry on through the episodes that I will keep referring to older examples of particular mechanics, particular horror tricks, if you will, tropes, to use another term. It's not necessarily bad that Cryptic are recycling these. In fact, you can argue that there are only 7 plots in the entire world, and yeah, Cryptic are actually doing a pretty good job here. It's not going to go down as A-list horror. Certainly, I would not say I was scared, per se, during this episode, but yeah, it's certainly pulling up more atmosphere than the usual kill 5 packs of trash, yay, you're done, this planet is safe, have a cookie. Yeah, Cryptic are definitely getting better as they get the hang of this. It's worth remembering, obviously, that STO had a very truncated dev cycle, and we're, what, a year, give or take, 9 months in from release? So they've certainly had plenty of time. In fact, I would say this is the state the game should have been in at release. Now, coming up, we have yet another horror genre staple. Again, it's well done, and I'll turn the audio back up for this bit, because it really is rather effective.
Barney, I see you. Barney, what will you do?
Look at you, hacker. Sorry, my showdown impression is a little bit rusty, but again we come back to perhaps the shift between fear and horror. Fear is knowing it's bad, horror is knowing how bad. Horror, in this case, is knowing that there is something down here, it's smart, it's clever, and it probably doesn't like you, and it certainly isn't entirely sane. Here we have another class-specific bypass. In this case, I'm a science officer. I can switch off these plasma vents. A tactical officer or an engineering officer would have to just dive through and roll through them to avoid getting, well, I think incinerated is the polite way of putting it. I didn't actually get hit by one. Those of you who play World of Warcraft will remember Naxxramas, the Frogger trap. What does it say about difficulty? That was the hardest thing in Naxxramas 2.0. Anyway, we have our first relay. And we also have our mysterious assailant, Gain. Now, at this point, he doesn't really hang about. In fact, he doesn't hang about at all. He just vanishes. Your second clue, if your first wasn't his rather odd intonation, is that he's not organic. He's actually really not organic. I won't spoil it entirely. Suffice it to say, there's a perfectly valid reason why he can appear and disappear at will. Anyway, this is a dead end. Let's just crank the speed up a bit to save on time and get to the second relay. Except that we're not going to stay fast forward for very long, because our dear friend is about to make another of his vocal appearances.
Barney, dressed all in red. Barney, soon you'll be dead.
Well, well, you have to applaud his genre savvy if nothing else. Now, at this point, the episode takes a slight turn downhill because up to this stage, Cryptic have been really good about showing rather than telling. But here they go back to text, they go back to telling us what's happening rather than show us. Think about how more effective this sequence would have been if instead of the text boxes, you'd heard the begging and then the weapons fire and then the scream. Particularly a scream, in fact, because, of course, Star Trek weapons kill quickly. Most people don't even know them for the ah rather than the ah. So that would have given you the message quite clear that whoever this guy was, he was not only vicious, he was a total sadist as well. And this sequence in the room up ahead, again, is a missed trick. Remember what I said in part 1 about Pavlovian conditioning? Here you've been told, you've been shown that there are Devidians in the room behind you. And of course, bang, they ambush you the moment you go for the console. But you're expecting it. You've been cued that you're going to get jumped. So maybe if this had been a bit different, maybe if instead of fighting the Devidians now, you had the cue, you got into the room, nothing happened. You trigger the console, nothing happened. And you just start to relax. You just think, okay, they're playing games, they've set up a false alarm. You go out into the corridor, and bang, the Devidians jump you. You get the blue light, you get the glow. And all of a sudden, you can't rely on your assumptions once again. That's another key thing about scaring people. Your assumptions don't work. So every time I came up to one of these consoles, I assumed I was going to get an ambush, and surprise, surprise, yes, we have more Devidians. So just, if you're going to do another horror episode, Cryptic, remember to play with people's assumptions. Make it so they can't trust the usual game logic, the usual game mechanics, even the usual plot conventions. Anyway, let's dispatch the rest of these blueies and get on with it. So, it's at this point that the episode begins to degenerate back down into the traditional run and gun fare. Yes, it turns out Gyne was in fact a hologram. Apparently too much blue light makes holograms go insane. I bet that isn't in the user manual. Anyway, this is a pretty straight fight. You have a decent sized pack of Devidians and one murderous hologram. He deploys mostly science abilities, tachyon harmonics, nanoprobe infestations, and such like. I will admit that at this point I was starting to get the impression that Cryptic were running out of ideas, because of course there's one horror trope, if you will, that you can't really deploy very well in SEO, and that is the whole picked off one by one trope, where your team gradually gets whittled down by something. In this case, of course, you couldn't really have him kill off away team members because, of course, we can just code white and get them back up. And of course, if you have 5 players doing this mission, you can't turn around to 4 of them and say, sorry guys, you can't finish the mission. He's a Ferengi, dear. Of course he's selling more than Darbo and drinks. Anyway, we have the encryption key that was mysteriously referred to in the presumably slightly bugged objectives list for the mission. And we are going back to the lift. Hopefully this time it will actually drop us to the computer core and not to some spider-infested flea pit. And yeah, that is as good a place as any to leave it. I will see you for part 3.